Welcome, everyone, even if you're not there. This is what, John, our seventh. Pretty cool. 45 subscribers now.
Mhm.
A long way short of the million, but we'll get there.
Good start.
No, we talked about topping and tailing, didn't we? This conversation, and I think the question was to start: have we had any further thoughts, further insights? I guess not just on the meaning of conversation leadership, but more broadly on conversation leadership itself. I
hmm
think you just mentioned that you had a little thought.
I
So
think last time I used the word awareness was if I way
yes, yeah,
oversimplified it to almost, what's the definition or what do we mean? Or, oversimplified to one word, raising awareness of what you're bringing to the conversation, what's going on in the conversation, what others, and then I think we even talked about it's not just the one conversation you're in, but the aggregate of all of these
yes, the public discourse, the great
discourse thing.
conversation, as it's sometimes called.
An awareness of, for me, it feels almost helpless or too big or, like as if I'm not part of it, but, that awareness that you are. Every conversation
Actually, we're going
is.
to talk primarily about awareness today in a slightly different context. So that's
Perfect.
interesting.
So then, yeah, the word, if I were to add a word to my definition or oversimplify again to a slightly different word, what came up for me last night and this morning thinking about it is relational. Something about the space between our words,
Yeah,
the space between our relationships, the space between our conversations. There's something in the relational. It's not me, it's not you, it's like both of us or it's between
it's
us.
that space between us, they call it all the time. It's interesting that you say that because I'd started to give that concept a little bit of thought as to what that metaphor means earlier in the week, and I've probably got nothing to share now, but maybe next week I might have some insights on that, and we could talk some more. Actually, that could make a good future topic,
hmm
um, as to what does that mean, and in understanding it, how does it help the conversation? But I
How
don't think
about
I've got anything specific to add. Though I got a feeling if I put my mind to it, I know there's been a whole lot of stuff going on in my head during the week, and it's it's seeped out through my ears. We'll pick up on some
we'll
of those
find.
things, I think, at a later
What if
time.
just for one second, like what if somebody's watching this for the first time or hearing of conversational leadership for the very first time?
Okay,
What would be off the top of your head just for a second? What is it if it's somebody's first time hearing it?
I one of the things I do is, you know, clearly if I've got a sentence or two, I can't do it justice. We can't do it justice. So I might just say um, it's a conversational approach to life. Is a
hmm
nice, simple catch-all. But the other thing that I do is to basically say, hey, we've got two words, conversational leadership. First and foremost, it means seeing leadership as a practice, not as uh,
Job title or
a
role.
job title or role or position or authority. And then, of course, our lovely quote from Patricia Shaw, where part of the work of leadership is to convene conversations that might otherwise not happen.
hmm
And I just putting those two definitions together, I find it that's one way I do it. Um, and anything else tends to be a lot longer.
Okay. All right. Got it.
And yourself?
I mean, this is we'll have to do this on one of our live streams, but I like to get creative with that definition of just the word conversation.
That's true. Yeah. I'll tell
So,
you something I have done. I've been having a few conversations with ChatGPT
okay.
about a an alternative framework or frameworks.
Nice.
But we'll
For
again
for
we'll come back.
conversational leadership.
We'll come back to
Okay. All right. Good. Then we'll have a revisit of that one. Okay.
that. Right, our topic for today. we've both run a lot of knowledge cafes, face to face and online,
Mhm.
um, over the years. And one of the things I've tried to do is to make it very conversational. The whole thing I say, conversation is king, or more often not these days, I say conversation is sovereign. It's all about the conversation. And I really don't want too much that's part of the cafe that's not about conversation. So, there's usually the speaker, the topic, there's the small group conversations, and then we have this so-called whole group conversation at the end of the cafe. Now, the way that tends to work typically in workshops and the like is it's not a conversation. It's a series of, I call them report backs. I think you Americans call them report outs. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter. It's a bunch of people taking it in turns, if it's face to face, standing up and sharing what they've experienced, or ideas or insights. And it's not a conversation. It's just a series of monologues. And I want to get away from that. So what I try to do, let's just take this now, how I do it online. I simply say, hey, we're going to have a whole group conversation, but I don't want you to see me as the facilitator. In fact, ideally, I don't want you to see me at all.
Hmm.
Um, this is a conversation of equals. I want this to be a conversation. So you come in, speak up. Uh, if you want to interrupt, and come in and build on that conversation, come in and build on it. If you see somebody trying to get into the conversation and they can't, don't rely on me and think, well, that's David's job to let them in. I can bring them in as well. If I know somebody wants to say something or's got something to say, invite them in. I'm inviting everybody to take responsibility, to become aware. This is the awareness bit, to become aware of the conversation, to be aware of the process, and invite each other into the conversation to make it sort of truly participatory. And you've probably seen me do this. It's
Mhm.
a struggle because people are not used to it. And
Mm.
usually what they do, they 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 might physically put their hand up, or more likely they'll put their Zoom little yellow hand up, and they will stand in a queue, just like you do, in a face-to-face event,
Yep.
and speak in order. And it's not a conversation. It's really tough to make that a conversation.
Yep.
And I know we had never talked about this before, and I just wonder what your thoughts were on that, and whether you've tried that, whether you think it's worth doing. Do you have any alternatives? Hey, what do you reckon?
We could get creative, and yeah, I've never really thought about.
Yes.
I always aim for the same thing, the group conversation at the end, but we could get very creative on how it happens. I was listening and I wrote a bunch of things just to try and remember. Um, I know one of the things I learned from you early on was when everybody comes back to the group, it's almost the exact same words you use every time, which is who would like to continue the conversation?
Yeah,
Now, there is a
that's my
funny
subtle way of saying, hey, this isn't a series of
it
report outs.
it's a conversation, and it's meant to be like you just came from these three rounds of conversation, so like let's treat this as one more. Do you
Yes.
remember? I have a funny little story that I think is worth capturing. We were in person together one time, and you said that question, and I've heard you say it many times, and so I'm used to it. But that one time, that particular group, people raised their hands not to speak, but to vote as if they were saying, yes, I want to continue the conversation, as if you had asked a yes, no question, as if
Oh,
people could
okay.
say, no, I don't want to continue anymore. I'm going to leave now. Do you know what I mean? Like, so my little thought on it, I've reframed it from like, who wants to continue this conversation just from that one funny experience that makes me laugh of like, people thought it was a voting question, not an encouragement. So I just directly say, let's continue the conversation. And I'll even say this too, like again, learning from you, but just many cafes. Um, I get a read of the group during the first four steps of the process. And if I have a hunch that one person is going to dominate, or this is a very quiet group, or I have a hunch that these are very it's going to be debriefs would be the other word, or report out, report back, debrief. Like
Because
in round
every
one,
group is different, isn't it? Every group's different.
and so if there's a way to like just even be direct with them if you need to and be like, we're actually not looking for debriefs or report outs. We're
Hmm.
actually looking for a whole group to have a conversation. Can we try that? So that was like my first point. It's just like those first words when you get the group back together. Let's also not forget your magic of when you're lucky enough to be in person, removing all the tables and having everybody sit in a circle. I think to this day, decades later, a lot of people, it's not that common for people to have had an experience of sitting in a circle,
No, it's not. No.
especially in a relatively large group. So that already does something like, ooh, what's going on here? So that's a good reminder. That's hard to do virtually. So um, then
Very
here's
hard.
another one. I don't know if you do that. I think you do. In fact, I know you do, but I very intentionally, it's a tiny little facilitator's trick. So I'll start it off, and so clearly I've got power, and I'm starting and I'm saying what we're all about to do, that kind of thing. After one person speaks, whoever it is, fine, they go for
Mhm.
30 seconds or 5 minutes, whatever it is. I hold my tongue and all my energy like you wouldn't believe. It is
Oh,
so, I'm so drawn to speak after that person and say, thank you, or who's next, or anything, any words. But if I do that, they now rely on me to speak in between every single
they
person.
would expect that every time. I do the same. In fact, I've got a golden rule that I've never broken as yet, and this usually applies face to face, but also online. Is when I say, who would like to continue the conversation, or let's continue the conversation. I keep quiet. I
Yeah.
wait until someone speaks. If there's a long silence, so be it.
Mhm.
I did a cafe years ago in Singapore, and again, just given the Asian culture, no one. Actually, it was in a pub.
Mm.
Not
And
many
still,
cafes
no
were in
one.
the pub, and there were a lot there, maybe 30 or 40 people. Not a word, not a word. And it seemed like an age. I felt, and it was really hard not to join in, but I didn't. Eventually, somebody spoke up, and then once they realized that I wasn't going to criticize them or put them on the spot in any way, it really did open up. But I've got the recording of that session. It's 2 minutes. 2 minutes
Mm.
is a long time.
That's a long time. Yeah, 20
Um,
seconds is a long time. Yeah.
but you're right. I'm not too sure I've explicitly done it after the first speaker, but that makes sense as well. That makes tremendous sense because you're just sending the message, I am not going to intervene. I'm not going to dominate this conversation. It's your conversation.
It's not a facilitated conversation. And what's so hard is as facilitator of or host of a knowledge cafe, I very rarely join in the breakouts. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
point being selfishly, I often am missing the small group, and I'm often interested in the topic too. So like step out of facilitator host role and just into participant role. You've got that difficult balance of like I want to join in and ask a question or say something, but if I do, I'm still in role. Like people might start looking at me to
Yeah.
do that every
I
time.
don't,
And
by
that's
and large, I don't do it either.
yeah.
It's quite easy just simply to keep out of it online. But face-to-face sessions, I like to walk around and try to listen in. The problem is if I get too close to the circle, sorry, to a table, they invite me into the conversation, which
Yeah.
is not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Also, I disrupt the conversation because I know I'm listening in. And if I stand a little further back, I can't damn well hear them.
You can't hear it. Yeah. Yep.
So all I can do is observe the room and observe the energy in the room to, get some feel maybe as to when to change tables and the like.
The other
But by
thing
and
I
large,
would bring up,
I don't get involved. Although sometimes, if it's a topic, if it's if I'm say running it for an organization and it's a topic that they've chosen and something I don't know nothing about because I'm not part of that organization, I certainly won't do it. If I'm doing it on knowledge management or artificial intelligence, I've got, as a participant rather than the host, I've got some thoughts and views in it, I'll often sit at the table
Mm.
and join in. But by and large, I don't, because I end up disrupting the conversation. It's not the conversation that they would have had if I wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you joining in, it's, as soon as any person joins in, you or anyone else, it forms a new group. And this is where all that organization development stuff that I love comes in. Like, how long, the beauty of the Knowledge Cafe process, one of them is, it's such a small group, three, four, five people in those small breakouts on purpose. Um, and what I wrote here in my third and final note was the time it takes. And what I mean by that is if you're talking to yourself, you can bond to yourself like instantly, right? If you're talking to one other person, to me, also pretty instant bond, right? As soon as you get to about a group of three people, now it's like, who feels left out? Who are two people talking to each other? Are all three of us included? The point I'm trying to make is how long does it take for all three of us to be in the conversation? In
Yeah,
a group of three, not that long. 1, 2, 3 minutes, maybe, if you're lucky, if everybody speaks.
because at
Now,
least every person has had to have spoken,
but now get
maybe
up
at
to
least twice.
4, 5, 8. Start thinking about, the knowledge cafes we run 20, 30, 40, 50 people. I'm just literally talking about linear time. How many minutes, how many hours does it take for a group of 50 people to speak up and feel bonded and feel trusted and feel safe, feel courageous, like step in to this conversation? It takes way more than the 10 or 15 minutes that we have.
That's right. It does.
So
Yes.
that's where I think the end of the Knowledge Cafe, there's no fault in the process. It's just, it's easy to hide in that final group conversation.
It's
So,
got the term social loafing.
yeah, there you go. So, is that okay? To your point of like, do we need to be creative and do something that's like, do we need to have, I think you and I have done this or even talked about like, all right, so if we've got more than 20 people, we're going to split into two groups. And this group of 10 is going to have a conversation and this other group of 10, just so that it's a little bit smaller.
I think I told you I did a cafe once for Johnson and Johnson in Ireland,
Yeah.
and I had 100 people.
Yeah. And you did
Uh,
like four separate ones
I
at the
had
same
four,
time.
and they had standing tables,
Yep.
and that worked. That worked. I was surprised it did. I
Yeah.
was I was really worried. It worked really well. So there were four separate conversations going on in the room. But you just reminded me of something else that be good to get your opinion on. I tend to quite like it face to face when there are no tables because people can sit a lot closer. It's more intimate. Um, but there's a strange phenomenon that happens. It always happens because it starts off fine for the first round. Come the second round, while they're moving groups, often someone grabs me and wants to have a conversation with me. So I've taken my concentration off what's going on in the room. And when I turn back to the room, what people have done is they've merged the groups. So rather
Mm.
than now maybe 10 groups of four, there's only 5 groups of 8.
Mm.
And okay, I don't I don't admonish them for doing that. It would make no sense. It's done. Um, Sometimes I remember beforehand, and I ask people not to do it, but often they still do it.
Yep.
And I think they do it because um, I think it feels safe. It feels safer in a larger group. You don't have to engage. And this is one of the great things about the three or four is it's very difficult not to engage in the conversation in a larger group. It is easy to sit on the side and just listen and
Mhm.
um, be lazy, really. Uh,
Yeah.
But I just wonder what your thoughts were on that, because you and I have got very different approaches and very different backgrounds and ways of thinking about things. So have you got any thoughts about had any experience of that?
Of which part of like how to engage the whole group in a big group
Well,
conversation
no,
or
no, well, one way of putting it would be how would you stop those groups merging? Because I
oh,
believe
that merging.
you
Okay, okay, the
do.
merging thing.
Um, or are you perfectly okay with the groups
Yeah,
merging?
I'm closer to what you are there. Like to me, it's all data. It's all an experiment. It's all like we've set the tone if it's about conversation. So hopefully people would be open to just like the word I used last week of awareness. Hopefully they'll be aware that, oh wow, this group of 8, to your point, maybe I feel safer. Maybe I feel disengaged. Maybe I feel bored. Maybe I like that it's large group. Like notice that. Notice like the group size and then when you go back to the office or wherever you're going back to, like, apply that to your personal life, apply that to your family, apply that to your projects in the office. Like, how big are your project teams? So no, I wouldn't. And yeah, I don't think I've ever said there's like that's not true. Well, yeah, in Zoom, right, we've got control of how big the rooms are, so that's easy. In person, which happens much more rare now, I think I say things at the very beginning of like, we're aiming for groups of three, no larger than four. I say
Mhm.
that, but I don't make a big deal
Yeah.
out of it. So I thought you were going to say, because what I've seen a lot is, have you had the problem? Like, I've got my chimes and my bowls that I ring, or
Yes.
because I just don't have the loudest voice in the world. So it's hard for me to like get a whole group to stop at the same time. And in person, I find that's really important because if one group keeps going and they're just so engaged and every other group stops and they hear and they stand up and they start rotating, you know what happens? Those three people stand up and now they've got nowhere to go because all the other groups have already started. And so they
Yes.
end up having a second round by themselves. And again, part of me is like, oh, I want to break them up and send them somewhere else or tell
Mhm.
everybody to stop and everybody reform. But I just kind of trust that whatever happens is best.
Is yeah, fundamentally I don't want to control, and I don't want to be seen to be controlling, because as
Yeah.
soon as they see me as controlling, then it's going to impact the openness of the conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, if I do this, maybe David will publicly, tell me off.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to avoid that. Um, Although at times I desperately want to. No, we're kind of drawing close to time. In fact, what I wanted to do was, we've been talking about this in the context of a cafe, but I just kind of wonder what lessons could be learnt in more everyday conversations, in the business setting,
Well, that's one of those that I've said to like when I'm training knowledge cafes. Um, it wasn't in my first cafe or my second or my third as a participant or host or anything. But after, I don't know, 10 or 20 or 50 cafes, it it was so clear to me the pattern, like across cafes, what I noticed in, I don't want to use this word, but I will anyway, like the best cafes or the most exciting or the most engaging or the
Mhm.
ones I really remembered. Um, I didn't really like the fact. I didn't like the pattern at first, but it's held true for me. What I notice is if everyone introduces themselves, whether it's a group of three, four, five, I really appreciate that. Without those introductions, I just have so much curiosity and so much wonder and who is that person? What's their accent? What's their name? Like I need that to like really feel like the whole group is in. It's the old you've heard them what? Nobody speaks twice before everybody speaks once, right? Like just introductions. I need that. And then I need someone to say a little something that's slightly controversial, and I need someone to disagree with it.
Yes,
And this
yes.
is the part I don't like, but it's true. Like those are the most engaging, most memorable, most learning full, most relational ones where like people are willing to sort of, I don't like the word disagree, but like, share different
But that's
views.
but that's where the learning is. It's in the disagreement, the fact that people see things differently, or they misunderstood things.
And so to your question, when I take it back to like my project teams or family or personal relationships, that's something I've taken back. Like I sort of, has everyone said hello in this room? Because if not, in like a family gathering, I wouldn't really think of that normally, right? But
Mm.
actually now I do because of the Knowledge Cafe. Oh, somebody hasn't spoken at all. Wonder what's going on for them. Should I invite them in? Are they okay to not speak? Like, I notice all that stuff. And then same thing, like if everybody's getting along and we're chatting about the weather and sports and our commutes, then, right, it's just not that engaging for me, sadly. It's maybe sometimes. But like, so I often wonder, like, am I the one that has to sort of speak a different perspective, which is scary. Um, so yeah, those are like,
But you're making me think that in most everyday conversations, we're not particularly aware. We're not looking to help with if you like, the quality of the conversation that's
hmm,
taking place. So everyone's talking about the weather or whatever. It's not so difficult to I know, guide that conversation into something more interesting, more meaningful, without being controlling.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the balance, isn't it? Is if you're not careful, you can get very controlling,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
that's not what we're about. Shall we stop there?
Sure.
Before we do,
Have we furthered conversation, or in what ways have we furthered conversational leadership in the
has there
last?
been any? Have we had a disagreement here? No, we haven't really. Have we got some further insight into what conversation leadership's all about? I guess in some ways we have a little bit in the sense that it's a it's about all of us being staying aware in a conversation and thinking about the other participants and recognizing that Mary hasn't said a great deal, and again gently inviting her in some way without sort of, if you turn and say, well, Mary, you've been very quiet, is not the way to do it. Is to simply say, I know, Mary, I think you got some thoughts on this. Wait, what happened there? What happened? There you are.
I crashed. Zoom crashed, but I'm back.
You're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll edit that bit
This is what happens live, I guess.
out. Or maybe we won't edit it out. It has a little bit of humor to it all. But yeah. So any thoughts of your own?
The what advanced today for me, yeah, I liked your thought right there of like, did we have a disagreement, maybe, or different views? Maybe we need to like practice that. Um, I liked the idea. I never really thought about like at the end of a knowledge cafe, instead of just sitting in circles and having a conversation, you could actually have a little mini sub process. And I think that on two levels. First of all, that would be innovation for a knowledge cafe, like some way of breaking in them into other small groups or some other type of group-ish conversation at the end. That's interesting to me. And then what we were saying after that, like what do we learn from these knowledge cafes that we can take back to the office or wherever? I think if we did those experiments at the end enough times, something would emerge that advances conversations
Yeah.
elsewhere, outside of knowledge cafes.
Let's talk some more about that, shall we? But
Sounds
in the
good.
meantime, let's stop there. Thank you, John. Thank you, me.
Yeah.